They laughed the moment he stood up. Not a loud laugh. Not cruel. Just enough to sting. The kind of quiet, dismissive laughter that fills a room when someone is already judged before a single word is spoken. The kind that says, without saying it, that you do not belong here. The room was filled with engineers from different countries, suits pressed clean, laptops glowing, decades of credentials sitting comfortably on the table. And there he was, standing near the end, holding a rolled blueprint in his hands. A Filipino inventor. Not from Silicon Valley, not from Europe, from a place many of them associated with beaches, nurses, and overseas workers, not power grids, not advanced infrastructure, not city-saving technology. Someone leaned back in their chair and said it out loud, almost casually, as if stating a fact everyone already agreed on. A Filipino like you has no chance here. No one interrupted. No one corrected him. The blueprint was gently pushed aside, not thrown, not rejected harshly, just moved out of the way, like an object that did not need attention. Impossible, another voice said. The word landed heavy on the table. What they did not know was that the city outside that building was already on the edge of darkness. Storm clouds were rolling in faster than predicted. Power demand was peaking. One failure in the system, one miscalculation, and millions of homes would go dark. Hospitals, traffic systems, entire neighborhoods. The room they sat in was warm, well lit, and comfortable. But the grid they were responsible for was under stress. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, listening, as the laughter faded into polite silence. His name barely registered with them. To most, he was just the Filipino guy with an idea they assumed came from a place of theory, not reality. He had grown up in a country where power outages were not hypothetical scenarios discussed in conference rooms. They were lived experiences, where brownouts forced families to light candles and pray the electricity would return before the heat became unbearable, where improvisation was not a buzzword, but a survival skill. But none of that was visible on his resume in a way they respected. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows. Inside, the air felt heavy, not tense yet, just uncertain. Have you ever been in a room where you knew, deep down, that everyone had already decided who you were before you opened your mouth? Where your accent, your passport, your origin quietly worked against you. He looked at the blueprint still resting on the edge of the table. Months of work, years of thought, a lifetime of quiet preparation behind it. He knew what it could do. He knew what it was designed for: to stabilize, to adapt, to prevent cascading failure when everything else began to collapse. But the question lingered, unspoken, yet loud. Could a Filipino inventor really hold the answer to a problem that some of the world's biggest minds had failed to solve? The rain outside grew heavier, tapping faster, like a clock counting down. Somewhere in the city, systems were straining. Sensors were blinking. Warnings were beginning to line up on screens no one in this room was watching closely enough. And as the room slowly moved on to the next agenda item, leaving him standing there with his idea quietly dismissed, one truth remained untouched. They did not know that the real test was no longer theoretical. They did not know that in just a short while, everything they believed about who was capable and who was not would be forced into the light. Because sometimes history does not announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently in the hands of someone everyone chose to underestimate. The reason they laughed was not personal. That made it harder. It was structural, historical. A quiet bias passed down through industries and institutions for decades. They had been trained, intentionally or not, to believe that innovation came from certain places. That real engineering was born in laboratories with endless funding, not in countries known more for exporting labor than technology. To them, the Philippines was a destination, not a source, a place you visited, a place you outsourced to, not a place you expected to save a modern city from collapse. In that organization, no Filipino had ever been placed in charge of a critical system, not because Filipinos lacked intelligence or discipline, but because no one ever imagined them in that role. The ceiling was invisible, but solid. He felt it from the beginning. In the way questions were directed past him, in the way his suggestions were acknowledged politely, then ignored, in the way his accent seemed to slow conversations, as if people had to decide whether his words were worth the effort to fully hear. The first challenge came quietly. A review panel dismissed his proposal without discussion. Too unconventional, too adaptive, too risky, they said. Another engineer joked that maybe it would work in a small village, not a major city. He smiled, nodded, and went back to his seat. The second challenge cut deeper. During a simulation exercise, he was assigned a minor role, far from decision-making. The test scenario mirrored real conditions: power demand surging, weather instability, system fatigue. He watched as conventional solutions failed one by one. He saw the cascade coming before it happened. He wanted to speak. He hesitated. Then he did. "What if we reroute the load dynamically?" he suggested, not based on static thresholds, but real-time stress patterns. The room paused. Someone frowned. Another shook his head slightly. "That is not how it is done," they replied. So he watched again, quietly, alone in a crowd. What they did not know was where his confidence came from. Before arriving there, he had worked in environments where failure was not an inconvenience but a disaster. Remote areas, limited resources, systems that had to adapt or break. He had learned to listen to machines the way farmers listen to the weather. To notice patterns others dismissed as noise. He had grown up fixing things not because it was impressive, but because there was no alternative. That kind of education does not come with certificates that impress international panels. It comes with scars, patience, and a different way of seeing problems. As the storm outside intensified, the test scenario ended poorly. Too many failures, too much delay. The room grew restless. For the first time, uncertainty crept into their voices. And then someone said it, almost reluctantly. Let him try. Chairs shifted. Screens reset. The simulation was prepared again, this time with his approach allowed, though not fully trusted. He stood up slowly, walked to the console, and placed his hands calmly on the surface. Every eye in the room turned toward him, not with hope, with expectation of failure. The silence that followed was thick. This was the moment they believed would confirm everything they already thought. He did not rush. That alone surprised them. Most people, when given a sudden chance under pressure, move too fast. They over-explain. They try to prove themselves. He did none of that. He took a breath, eyes scanning the data as if he had been waiting for this exact pattern to appear. Then he made the first adjustment. A small one. Almost invisible. Load distribution shifted slightly. Sensors recalibrated. The system responded, not dramatically, but smoothly. Someone leaned forward in their chair. He made another change. This time, anticipating a failure before it appeared. A safeguard activated early, not as a reaction, but as a conversation with the system itself. The simulation did something unexpected. It stabilized. Not completely, not yet, but enough to make the room go quiet. He continued, layer by layer. Each decision built on the last. No wasted movement, no unnecessary complexity. His design did not fight the system. It listened to it. It allowed flexibility where rigidity had caused collapse before. This was not brute force engineering. It was adaptive, almost human. Someone whispered, "How is he predicting that?" Because he was not predicting, he was recognizing. The same way Filipinos recognize when a storm is about to flood the street, when a generator is about to fail, when something is off, even if the numbers still look acceptable. The laughter was gone now. In its place was something heavier. Attention. The man who had spoken earlier, the one who dismissed the idea so easily, stood up slowly. Not to interrupt, just to see the screen more clearly. Minutes passed. The simulation reached the point where it had always failed before. This time, it did not. The room remained silent as the system absorbed the shock, redistributed the load, and held. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to prevent a blackout. Enough to change the conversation. He stepped back, hands relaxed at his sides. He did not smile. He did not look around for approval. He simply waited. No one spoke at first because no one knew how to frame what they had just seen without admitting something uncomfortable, that they had been wrong. But this was only the beginning, because what they were about to face was not a simulation. Outside, alarms were beginning to sound. The real alert came through moments later. Not a drill, not a test. A major fault had just been detected in the actual grid. The storm had pushed the system beyond its limits. The exact scenario they had been simulating was now unfolding in real time. Screens lit up red. Voices overlapped. Procedures were called out, but hesitation slowed everything down. The conventional solutions were already proving insufficient. Then, without ceremony, someone turned to him. "Can your system handle this?" He nodded once. There was no time for debate. He moved to the controls, fingers steady. This was no longer about pride or recognition. This was about millions of lives staying lit, hospitals, homes, streets filled with families waiting out the storm. He deployed the system. At first, nothing dramatic happened. And then, slowly, the grid responded. Stress points eased, load shifted. The cascade they feared stalled, then stopped. The blackout never came. In the control room, no one spoke. Some stared at the screens, others lowered their heads, processing the weight of what had just been avoided. A foreign engineer, the same one who had laughed earlier, broke the silence. "I underestimated the Philippines," he said quietly. "Not the man. The country." There was no applause. None was needed. The respect in that moment was heavier than any noise. What they witnessed was not luck. It was the result of a culture that learns to endure, adapt, and find solutions where none seem obvious. A culture shaped by challenge, not comfort. Filipinos excel not because they are given more, but because they are forced to do more with less. Because humility keeps them learning. Because community teaches them that systems matter, not egos. As the storm continued outside and the city remained bright, one truth became clear. The story no longer belonged to just one inventor. It belonged to an entire nation that had been underestimated for far too long. And on that night, without speeches or headlines, the Philippines reminded the world of something it had forgotten. Never mistake quiet for weakness.